Well, looking at the guitars I've reviewed since 2022, I have to conclude Epiphone's Inspired by Gibson line has been quite a success. I've even heard a few reports from players who say their IBG Epiphones very much rival their Gibsons. But nowhere have I heard that more consistently than with the acoustic line, especially the Inspired by Gibson J-45. If you follow this channel, you know me as an electric blues player. And while I have performed acoustically from time to time in the past, I've always been primarily an electric guitarist. But in the same way I love jazz archtops, even though I don't really play much jazz, I love acoustic flat tops, even though I don't use them much these days. And it'd be pretty hard to justify buying a high-dollar USA model. Which is why the Eastman's got my attention, and also why the Epiphone Inspired by Gibson models have found their way onto my radar. Well, of course, these have been out a few years now, and there are loads of videos on them, so I won't spend a lot of time on detailed specs. But if you're completely unfamiliar, I'll just point out that these are built using all solid woods. Solid Sitka spruce for the top, solid mahogany for the back, sides, and neck. Now, it also has quarter-sawn spruce bracing and a bone nut and bone bridge saddle. Now, the fingerboard is the Indian laurel Epiphone's been using on most of their guitars, but I have to say, this is a nice-looking example. If you'd told me it was rosewood, I doubt I would have looked twice. Well, you sharp-eyed viewers will notice the pickguard on this example is not stock. These normally come with the big 60s style pickguard, whereas this one has had that swapped out for the earlier, smaller pickguard, which is also what's on the current Gibson. Now, theoretically, less pickguard should allow the top to vibrate a little bit more freely, and it could have been done for that reason. Or the previous owner just wanted it to look more like a Gibson. In any event, I prefer the look of the smaller guard myself. And it was done very well. You'd never know it wasn't factory. Now, I have to confess, it's been over 10 years since I played a Gibson J-45, so I have no reference for direct comparison. But I'll tell you, Gibson acoustics have been notoriously variable since the very beginning, with some sounding pretty average and some sounding absolutely magical. And what I do remember jibes with what others have said about this Epiphone version. It's a very nice sounding guitar in its own right, but not quite the same as the original, having a bit more pronounced mid-range than the typical Gibson, while not being quite as extended in the highs and lows. Now, personally, I tend to gravitate toward more mid-rangey acoustics, since I don't do a lot of cowboy chord strumming, and they're well suited to my blues style and single note playing. Now, the one complaint I keep hearing about this guitar is the electronics. It's a Fishman Precis system. Let's have a listen. Well, clearly these electronics don't do it justice at all. I didn't experiment with the volume and tone controls much, but it sounds like a fairly cheap system. And if I were going to perform live with this guitar, well, I'd just replace the pickup system entirely. My only other criticism is the tuners on this one aren't very smooth. Now, they do the job, and it holds tune reasonably well, but using them isn't really enjoyable, and you could easily drop in some much better 3-on-a-plate Kluson-style tuners for not a whole lot of money. Still, those quibbles aside, this guitar itself is quite impressive, especially given its $750 price tag. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, give it a like. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. And I will see you again very soon.